Alright, so we are at the part where we are going to discuss how we can create a message in chat room. And yeah, let's just get to it. We're almost there. After this, we've just got three topics. This is going to be a little bit long. I'll make a video for this and also for this, but the rest they're just very small. You're almost there. It's I know it's a lot of content to grab. All right, so how do we create a message in chat room? Let's go here in our index router. uh, we have this app .u/room route which is going through this decode middleware, and it's using this chat room router. I'll come here and I'm going to talk about this and how I can create a message in a particular room ID, and it's going to be a post type. The controller is defined in chat room dot post message. So I'll come here and just so that. All right, so I'm going to talk about this, but before I do this, we're about to create a new message in this new collection called chat messages. Let's just talk about that first quickly. All right, so in my models I have this file called chatmessages.js, and I have this file. It's called chat messages schema. It has an ID type string. We don't have to provide this because a default is always generated for us using UUID. By default, it gives us a string with dashes in it. So I'm just using a string dot replace method to replace all the dashes with an empty string. And then it has a chat room ID, a message. So mongoose.schema.type means that it can have a dynamic object. It can have whatever content I want. The reason I've done this because I want my chat message to have different types. Uh, so I have this type called string, and by default it defaults to type.text, which is defined here. Right now I have only one type, hence so for the message type text, I'll have a message object here which with just one item in it, message text against the message text. But imagine we can also have like multiple different types of messages. We can have a link where you where when someone just adds a link into your chat room, your server just does some rendering with that link and generates a header and an image for that particular link. So we can have an attach we can have a link, we can have a type for YouTube to embed YouTube videos, and it will have its own message body. We can have an attachment which has different types of attachment. We can have single attachment, multiple attachments, and all those different kinds of things. So message can handle all of those things because it's a mixed object, and for every type we can have a different message body. Like next we have posted by user, which is a string. It's going to be the current user ID who is going to post a message in this chat message collection. Our timestamps are true, which means created at and updated at, which are date objects, are going to be added automatically by Mongoose CRM. And then we have read by recipients, which is an array, of read by recipient schema. So let's just go here. What it does is I've set the ID to false, which means do not generate an ID for this because we don't need this. All we need is a read by user ID. So it's going to be a string, and this is going to be a user ID. So whoever has read a particular message, I'm going to just push this read by user ID, the user ID for that, and read at here. So, read at is basically going to be the timestamp when a user read that message. It's going to be of type date, and we don't have to provide this every time I call this a read by recipient schema. It's just going to take that date, whatever that is, and just add it here. So we don't have to do this. And I've set the timestamps to false because I don't need a created at or updated at, uh, because I have this read at. You could have just like ignored this. So you could have just like ignored this, kept timestamps true, and just use the created at method. But for learning purposes, and to demonstrate different capabilities of Mongoose, what I did was I disabled this and added this here. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Next, how we can create a post in chat room. I have the static method. It takes in a chat room ID, a message, and a posted by user. And all I do is I use this dot create method. I pass in this chat room ID. I pass in this chat room ID from my model message. This is basically going to be an object, and it's going to be something like this. So Message is something going to be like this: message text, something like that. In the cases where type is text, I only have one type for this, but you can have like multiple types. And then I have read by recipients, and what I have posted by user, and then I have read by recipients. So what I'm doing here is, for my read by recipients, I'm just passing in this read by user ID, which is defined here, and I'm passing in this posted by user method. And all this does is it's going to create an object for chat message, and inside that chat message is going to have a key read by recipients, which is going to be an array, and it's just going to have one item in it, and it's going to be basically the person who created that message. I'll walk you through the API for that. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So what I'll do is do this. I'll just return posted, just for the time being. Just bear with me, because I want to teach you about aggregations as well. So I have this post message controller, which is going to utilize this create a post in chat room method. And all I do here is I take the room ID, I validate my body, and all I'm doing is that, okay, I'm expecting this request.body. It needs to have this message.text, which needs to be a string. Otherwise, you're not going below here. And then what I do is I make an object with my message payload. I set message text is equal to request.body.message text, and the current logged in user comes in from request.user ID, which is coming from our decode middleware that we wrote earlier. And combined with all of this information, room ID, message payload, and current logged user, I simply send that data to my chat message model create post in chat room message. And this is where the fun part is. So whatever data that I'm creating, I'm also going to throw that message on my sockets. So remember we talked about global.io. Global.io is similar to the Windows object that we have in browser, but Node does not have a Windows object. And equivalent to that, it has this thing called a global.io, which is available throughout all of your applications at the same time. So in my index file, as soon as I created a server, I had this global IO variable, which started listening as soon as the server was created. And I had this global.io.on method, which is basically the socket instance. And as soon as this connection is established, I just asked it to listen on this connection method, and then I pass in this connection method, which is basically this. It just passes in this socket instance with all of these events. Now, every time a user subscribes to this room, I have this thing, and it's going to like subscribe other people's in the chat room as well. But anyways, moving backwards to our chat message. So I have this global.io sockets method, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that room ID that user has passed in. I'm going to say, for all the sockets that we have, uh, take from the sockets list, take this room ID and emit a new event, which is called new message, into this particular room ID, and throw this new message to the user, which is message equal to post. Now on the front end, or on the iOS or Android side, anywhere where they're using sockets, they they're online, they've maintained their connections, and if they're in that room at that particular time, this event is going to go to that very particular socket, and they are actually already subscribed to this room ID, so they're going to get this notification. But at the same time, I'm also going to return the response to user as success true, and return the post as is with status 200. I can also skip this. All I have to do is like return a status with 200. I don't have to like return the post with it, because I'm already sending that data. But it's better that if we have both of those things. All right, so let's see if all of this works. I have I'm I'm going to get all of my users. I'm going to. All right, so my server is not running. Let me start my server. Mongo has connected. I'll get all my users. I'll pick this ID. I'll log in with this ID. I'm already logged in, so I'm not going to like try to log in again. I'll try to establish a chat with 78E is the ID for Pikachu with Adil and Pikachu as consumer to support. I'll hit this message and it gave me this chat room ID. So what I'll do is I'll just come up here. Oh, sorry, installed wrong. Um, so I'll just come up here. I'll paste this ID. I'll come back here. I'll use this login ID. I know it's a lot of work, but and then I'll come in my headers. I'll update this token here because I didn't do that before. And for my message text, I'm going to say the time the time is 21:07 just to see, you know, and I'm going to hit send. All right, so this is what it did. It's added a collection as is chatroom ID message posted by user, read by recipient is just an array with the same user, which is me, because if I makes sense not because if I'm posting the message, that means I've already read it because I know what the message is, and the ID for this particular collection, this document in that collection, and the type for this message is text, and then we already have this created that and updated that. Let's see this in our database as well. I'll go in my chat messages and I'll see. I'll see if this is being so right. So this is that record and this is my chart object as is. Now, if you come up here and you see this is not very readable. I don't know what this ID is. I have no idea. So let's improve that. I'll go back in my chat messages. I commented this out initially, but so much content. And what I'm going to do is first of all, I'm going to comment all this out. I don't need this. All right, so we've used this dot find, this dot find one, this dot create, and this dot delete so far. We've not used this dot aggregate. So what is aggregate? Aggregation is a pipeline in Mongoose which helps us to perform a sequence of operations in one query. I mean, you can have like multiple small queries like find by one, find many, and then you can like get different parts of the data from the database. But it can be very cumbersome, and for every query that you make individually, you're making a separate database connection, which can be very expensive. So I'm using an aggregation here. The first thing I'm doing is I want to aggregate. I want to get the ID from. All right, what I'll do here is I'll come up here and I'll just do this so that I don't have to. So I want to get an ID which matches the new post.id that I just created. So whatever I created, I was returning it before, but I want a little bit more than that. So what I'll do is I want to aggregate something with this match operator, and I'm going to say like get me a record, get me those records where this criteria matches, where the ID is equal to post.id. Let's see that. And I'm just going to keep this as I don't care what the value is. I'm just going to keep on hitting the API again and again. All right, so I said this is return me something which has this match.id, and it just did that. So nothing very different right now, but similar to what we have in MySQL, where we have right join and left join, we have lookups in Mongoose. So let's do that. So I want to join on another table called users collection and get me user whose ID is equal to posted by user. So you see this posted by user. I want to have an actual user object here. So I'm going to say lookup from the users table, and the local field here that is my collection as is this posted by user. Take that local field and go to the users collection and use this foreign field, this ID here, and whatever result that you get in here, replace this posted by user ID with the new object here. I can also have like posted by user 1 here, and I will keep this in posted by user 1 as well. And just for the sake of it, what my user structure is looks like is I have this ID, first name, last name, type, created that and updated that. I want this foreign key ID. I want to match it from there. So match this posted by user ID with the ID in users collection and get something from there. Now notice posted by user is a string here. What happens if I just do this? All right, so it remained as is, but it returned me this posted by user one as an array, and inside that array I have my object. Cool. I don't want this as is. I just want this to be replaced by this. And all right, so I have this posted by user, which is an array of objects, and it has one object. Doesn't make sense that this is an object. This doesn't make sense that this is an array. This should have been an object. So let's do that. Sorry, let's do that. I'll unwind this posted by user. So what this will do is, if this particular value is an array, unwind will take this one step backward and remove this array, and whatever is inside it will just attach it here. And let's just do that. All right, so it's no longer an object, right? It's this. Let's do another thing. All right, let's look up. I want more information about this chat room ID, as to what this ID represents. I don't know what this ID does. All right, so let's see. Did I save this? Oh, I did not save this. Sorry. So now I have this chat room info, which is also an array, by the way, and it has the entire chat room object. So what I want to do is, I went and looked in chat rooms collection. I had this local field chat room ID, and then I took the foreign field from ID, which is in my chat rooms collection, and added this new key, chat room info, and whatever I was getting from there, added it into an array of object. This is what lookup does by default. I don't want this as an object, so what I will do here is I will take that array out. Now this is where the funny part happens. I want to get these out as well, because I want to query these two arrays as well, right? Now if I unwind this array, how will this happen? Because previously our posted by user chat room info, they were like, they had just one object. So when I will unwind this right now, I just have one object. Just have a look at this. When I hit send, and I'm going to unwind this nested array of chat room info dot user IDs, which is like this. Just have a look. So what it did was, did I save this? Chat room info dot users. Sorry. 78 and 92. All right. 72 and 92. Posted by user Adil Imran. Chat room info. And oh, so I extended it, but I didn't do this further. So whatever I extend, I want to have, I want to go in my users collection and take these user name info dot user IDs, and make a join with an ID in that user ID, and whatever I get, I want to return into chat room info dot user profile. So let's see how that works. All right, so I have Pokemon. By recipient's ID and unwind chat room profile. So I have this Pikachu, and what happens if I do this? All right, so I have this chat room info, and what I did was I unwinded this chat room info.user IDs, and what it did was it took the last ID that I had and just replaced this with this entire chat room info object. Uh, and then what I did was further I wanted more information on this user ID as to what it was. I made I did a lookup, and then I went back and I started unwinding it from the array. I'm sorry, I lost the chat a little bit. So I made a lookup on the user profile based on this user ID that I had, and I ended up having this user profile. I'll just destructure it because I don't want this into an array, and this is what I will do. Now next what I want is, because I have a lot of extra information, I'll just group all of this information by my chat room ID. I'll just group this all with my chat room ID. Ah, this is what was messing around. I'm so sorry. I wasted your 5 minutes of your time. All right. Let's just. All right. So we were here previously chatroom info dot user IDs, and I just wanted to show you one thing. So I have these user IDs which is in this object here, right? When I unwind this, just have a look at what happens. Um, it created two objects for me. One has the previous user ID, which is of Pokemon, replaced with this entire chat room info, because this is what I'm doing here. I'm just unwinding this as the user ID objects, and the other has my information on it. So it took that array. Every time it has multiple arrays, what it will do is it will create it will just expand the entire object, one with one instance of the array and the other with the other instance of the array. I'll talk more about the unwind part, but let's just see that now we have the user ID's information, and what I will do is I will just try to uh, get the user ID from chat room info dot user IDs, which has just one user ID right now because we ended up unwinding it, and I'm using user profile here. So I want chat room dot info and user profile, but I don't want this as an object again. I want this to be destructured. Right now I have two instances, and they will remain two instances because our array had just one item in it. If it had two, so this would have become into four. This is how unwind works. Next, what I'll do is I'll just group my data. I'll group it based on the chat room info.id. So I'll group it based on my room ID. I'll take the last post ID. So whatever I have a post ID. Sorry, I have this ID here. I have ID here, and I have ID here. I'm just telling it whatever I have in these objects, just grab the last object and take ID from there. I'm doing the same from for chatroom ID as well, and the same for message as well, because the message is the same, and also for type as well. Just grab the last type from here and just return me that. So same for posted by user, and same for read by recipients. Just give me the last read by recipients ID, whatever that is, and then this is where the fun part is, and the same for created at and updated at. I'm saying for my chat room info object, I want you to take all that chat room info.user profile, so all of this user profile in this object and in the previous object, I want you to combine them and show them in this chat room.info as an array. Let's see what it does. So ID, the last ID, post ID, chat room ID, message, posted by user, read by recipients as is, and then we have chat room info with our user profiles that belong to this particular chat room. And yeah, that is pretty much it. I'm sorry I messed up in between. I'm thinking of re-recording it, but the problem initially was that what I was doing is I was trying to get the first ID in this from this group of IDs, and when I tried to do this, I was just getting one object, and I forgot that I had to like uncomment this, because aggregate always returns me an array. I don't want an array. I want the entire object as is. So this is where I ended up going wrong. I just need one item grouped by, and then I will do this aggregate 0, because by default aggregate returns me an array, and since this array just has one item, it doesn't make sense to return an array. So what I'll do is I'll just return this entire object as is. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this. It's probably going to be the same for our get conversation by room ID and get recent conversation. They're going to use aggregations as well. It's pretty they're actually pretty simple. uh, it's the same thing. But yeah, I just wanted to discuss one of these aggregations so that you have an idea. And yeah, that's it. I hope this helped. I'll add documentations for match, location, unwind, lookup, and group with this video below.